Hello everyone, this is Anugrah Rao. Welcome to the 51st episode of Microsoft Art of Code, brought to you by Millionlights. Millionlights is a TV channel dedicated to improving skills of people and their employability. Now, let me tell you more about Microsoft Art of Code. Microsoft Art of Code is a series of lectures, courses, and talks by experts who are going to discuss the latest Microsoft technologies, topics related to programming, and industry forecasts that are all focused on employability. This course is basically for people pursuing computer science. This content has been created by our partner Microsoft. And today, we have Christopher Harrison and Gabrielle with us who will teach you everything you need to upgrade your skills. Now, let's move towards the course. In the previous episode, we covered getting started with JavaScript and some portion of object-oriented programming in JavaScript. In this episode, we will cover the remaining part of object-oriented programming in JavaScript, and after that, we will move towards web workers. So let's get started.
So next, we're going to go into constructors and the prototype objects. So now we're getting deeper. We're getting into the good stuff. So constructors, just like in object-oriented program languages, they're pretty much used, to give set properties and methods for certain objects. Constructors can be written in various ways, either the same way we created the variable with an anonymous function, or the same way you kind of create an object. So I'm just going to give you a quick little demo of how to create a constructor. So let's say, what I forgot to mention, sorry. If you can either do like the variable, but also when you create a constructor, it's pretty much like a function. So there has to be a function keyword. And there's no constructor keyword, so don't let that confuse you. I'm sorry about that. So pretty much to start with the constructor, like I said, you start with the function keyword, and let's say we're gonna have a fruit constructor. And I guess I wanted to have the parameters name and color. Yeah, awesome. So what I'll do here is every time that an object is made using the constructor, I want it to log onto the command line and let me know that it's happened. So log created by constructor. Cool, awesome. And then what I'll do is I'll use the this keyword, just so you kind of know clearly we're talking about the this object. So this type.
Just like in Java or C#, so the current object.
Yes.
Okay.
So this type will give it, I guess, a type property, which will give it the function. Just say, hey, I'm a fruit.
Hi, I'm a fruit.
So every time we create some type of fruit object, it'll know that it's a fruit. Even though I hope the fruit knows it's a fruit. I hope you all know it's a fruit.
A little self-awareness here. This all of a sudden got very deep.
And then we'll just make this dot name is equal to the name parameter, and this dot color is equal to the color parameter. So all we really did was every time you now create an object using the fruit constructor, it'll then have a type property, a name property, and a color property. So let's say we want to do orange. I like oranges, they're citrusy. Just like we kind of did with the past example where we used the college alg object and we just said equals new object. That's kind of, like I said, was using prototyping and inheritance. We're going to do the same thing. So you're going to have a variable orange and you're going to make it equal to a new fruit. Yummy fruit. And we had to pass in some parameters, so clearly the name of the orange is orange. And the color of the orange is orange. Awesome. So that works. And then once you do...
Let's run this.
Oh, right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That would have been all bad. So once you do that, I want to be able to access the type function just so we can say, hi, I'm a fruit, even though we know what kind of fruit it is. Cool. And then I wanted also just to show us, you know, that orange does in fact have all of the qualities of the fruit constructor. So we could just simply console log the orange. Great. So this is what we have here. So I'm just going to quickly go and run it. Okay, so as you can see, what we just did was we console logged, or I actually flipped them, but it's okay. So what happened was when the object was created, it did in fact print object created by constructor, just like I asked it to at the top. And then it printed the orange, the actual orange, the object, and all we really have is type. Wait, no, this is wrong. It's not good.
I think you've just got the wrong script that you're calling there.
Yeah, okay. Oh no, this is bad.
No, that's fine. So what would have happened there if we just go back to the script? Not a big deal. If we just go back to the script there, is it would have just printed out both the color and the name as orange there. So we just ran the wrong script there. So not an issue.
Let me just see if I can fix it just really quick.
Okay, sure.
I think I'm sure where to find it. Nope. Did I save it? No, I didn't save it. Okay, now it should all work, I promise. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Well done.
So, like I said, it printed the object has been created by a constructor, just like I asked it to. And then we have the type. We have the type property, we have the name property, and the color property. So you now know, in fact, that the orange that the orange object does in fact contain all of the different types of all the different properties of the fruit object. Now notice that type didn't print like it was supposed to, and that's because I actually forgot the parentheses. But you guys know what would happen. It would simply print, "Hi, I am a fruit."
Yep.
So sorry for that mistake.
Happens to the best of us.
All the time. So moving on.
So this is one of those funny things about doing live is, hey, we're debugging right here. So I know everybody that's watching it, everybody else, you know, they have perfect code. They just type it and it just works.
Right.
You know, for us, every now and then, it just, you know. So anyway.
First time debugging live. Yes, it was awesome. So we just showed you how to create a constructor. So going back into talking about the prototype and the prototype object, as you saw, all objects will inherit the properties and the methods of the constructor. That's pretty much it. So you pretty much really just saw how prototyping really works. But it's also an easy way to, what we're going to go into now, with prototyping is kind of another way to add other methods and other properties after the constructor and the objects have already been instantiated. So we're really going to go into using the prototype keyword and kind of showing you more what prototyping can do. So that also leads back to inheritance, which you'll see in a few seconds. It's really all easy to show you with a demo rather than explaining little things. I've kind of noticed that. So it'll be a lot easier when I kind of show you, okay, what I'm about to do is create an object, and then from there kind of show you how prototyping can be used, like I said, to add methods and to add properties. So we're going to have two demos. One is going to be really short and one's going to be a little bit longer so you can really understand. The longer one, I might just actually walk you through the code and just show you step by step. And if you just have any questions, just ask Christopher. We can kind of go into it.
Hi.
So let's get into creating a prototype. So this, like I said, we're going to start with a very simple one. So first, let's create our constructor. So like I said, you can either create a constructor through just using the function keyword or kind of creating the variable and giving it a function. So we now have our prototype. We're working with fruits now, working with vegetables. As you can see, I'm hungry. So we're just gonna give it a name. So we just know that it's a vegetable. It's always gonna be a veggie. Hey, that's a V. I mean a B, not a V. Veggie. Awesome. So now every time you create an object with the vegetable constructor, it will always have the name veggie. Maybe we might give it a type because not every vegetable is named veggie and that'd be weird. So that's that. So as I was saying, I'm now gonna show you how to use the vegetable prototype the prototype keyword to add methods and properties to the vegetable constructor. So simply you just say vegetable, and then you type prototype. And from there we can give it another function, another variable. So we're just gonna give it a print function. And with the print function, we will do a console log.
It's log. It's such a wonderful toy.
And just say this dot type is good for you. Because vegetables are good for you. Eat your veggies.
We're getting a health lesson as well today.
And then from there, we'll just have a carrot. I like carrots. And we'll just give it the vegetable type. Awesome. And now we can I'll show you how now you can knowing that the carrot has inherited all the properties of the vegetable, just to show you that the prototype function actually worked, you should be able to call carrot.print, and it should be able to print veggie is good for you. So let's see. So, see, oh, well, there's supposed to be a space here, but it's okay. So the carrot object, in fact, did inherit the vegetable prototype. And what you can actually do too is you can still add things. So if you were to do vegetable dot prototype dot color, and we'll just give it like something funny, like wonderful colors. It could be anything. Oh, actually, you don't even have to do that. Now that I think about it, you kind of can just actually create the create the property itself, and then call it for the carrot.prototype dot color, and then make it equal to orange. So now, if you do, if we ask it to print the color of the carrot, let's see what happens. Oops, wait, what did I do? Did I mess that up?
I think you do need that on the vegetable.
I do, don't I?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I just give it a color. I'm pretty sure it'll overwrite though. Okay, let's see. Hopefully it works this time. No, what is going on?
Just comment out line 14 real quick.
Okay. Oops, what? Okay.
There you go.
Let's see.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure. Usually it overrides, but my next example actually should be able to show you that. So yeah, as you can see, carrot color is now, what a wonderful color. Awesome. So now we're gonna move on to the harder demo. Like I said, I'm just gonna open it up for you guys. Literally, it's called hard. And we're just gonna kind of walk through it. So what I did here was I created a person constructor, and it really was just giving it the first name, and then using the prototype function, the prototype keyword, we have given it a function. So hello, I'm whatever the person's first name is. Great, awesome. And then from there, we created a student constructor. So as you can see, it has a first name and it has a subject. So the difference between the last example and this example is we actually call the constructor of the person constructor inside the student constructor. So this is a lot different because what happens is we're going to be overriding a lot of methods. And actually, that's probably why the last override didn't work in the last example. So with this, we're going to have the properties of the person constructor, but we're going to be able to override them and kind of give it their own values. And then, of course, we have the this subject is equal to subject. So we now have the person constructor and the student constructor, which is calling upon the person constructor just to get some of its properties. So now that it's been created, so we have our student prototype is equal to object.create and the person prototype. So now this is kind of making the student with the prototype keyword able to change the values of the person.prototype keyword. So that's kind of what we were missing in the last example, and that's kind of why we had the error, and I'm sorry about that, I just remembered. So now when we have our student.prototype.constructor, we set the constructor to student, just so the code doesn't get confused and it's like, okay, well, are we calling the person constructor or are we calling the student constructor when we're creating a new student object? But once again, like I said, since the person constructor was called right at this line, it'll be able to still bring down the properties of the person constructor into the student object. So here, as you can see, we have the student.prototype.sayHello. So we had the sayHello function up here, but down here we're now able to override it and kind of add, not only are we saying hello, I'm blank with the first name property, but now we're adding and I'm studying blank, whatever subject is passed through. So here's just a quick little example of student and a new student. So it'll be using the student constructor, which of course, like I repeated before, will pull down the properties of the person constructor. And so we'll have Janet in applied physics. Well, student.walk, that is not supposed to be there. Please ignore that. I took that out because it was just complicated and I didn't want to confuse you guys. That was a mistake on my part. And then what I have down here, just so you really know, what we did was you can kind of have a function that'll show you if the object you have is actually an instance of the constructor you use. So as I said before, the object that we created is a new student1 object, and it called on the student constructor, and the student constructor actually called on to the person constructor. So in a sense, the student1 object that we have is an instance of both the student object and the person object. So they should both print out true. And I'm just going to run this really quick so you can kind of see how it works. And oops, I can't see. Oh no. Okay, so as you see, it says, hello, I'm Janet. I'm studying applied physics, like we saw in the example. And then it is true for being an instance of the student constructor, and it is true for being an instance of the person constructor.
Yep.
This is pretty much what I showed you here. And once again, it is an instance of both because the student1 object will call into the student constructor, and the student constructor will call into the person constructor, which is very similar to other object-oriented programs you can use. Mm-hmm. Yes, so I mean, yep. You pretty much can have a constructor call another constructor, and things like that. So not much of a different concept, but it's just the way that it's done is clearly a lot more different. So moving on. Just some final facts and final things I would really like to touch on, just so you can walk away in this module with a little extra something. So there is encapsulation, and it's pretty much the same as it is with other object-oriented programming languages. So the difference is, though, there is no public and private methods as there is with other languages. But some of the methods that we have discussed already will kind of help you with the whole creating private and public methods. So you could use enclosures for that. You can use constructors. And in some cases, you can use anonymous functions just to kind of help you with your encapsulation and kind of what you want to keep away from the code as a whole and what you don't. So if you notice, for example, when you have your different constructors, you know, the student constructor, when it was calling the person constructor, doesn't exactly know everything the person is doing. It just grabs it, just like, hey, thanks for that, but doesn't exactly see all the functionality of the person constructor. So that's kind of why constructors are used very heavily. Just as much as enclosures. So with the enclosure, it had its own functionality aside from the outer function. But it could use anything that the outer function kind of had as far as variable-wise, but doesn't know exactly everything that the outer function can do. So that kind of helps with the encapsulation problem within JavaScript. And then something that you might want to know, it's just a small little example. So some operators that are really big when you're dealing with objects is the in operator. Then there's the has own property method, and then there's like a for in loop. So what helps with the in operator will pretty much tell you if a property exists. It'll return a true or a false statement if the property exists within an object. So clearly we created a seafood object, and we have a small property and a big property. And we just want to know in the next line, okay, well, is the small property a real thing inside the seafood object? So it'll print out true. And then the has own property will kind of tell you, okay, well, was the property that it was given, was the property within this object given to it through inheritance, or was it one that is made within this object? Is it unique to the object? So what we show you here is we're checking the seafood object to see if it has the toString property. Now toString will always be inherited by all objects from the object, but it is not unique to the seafood object that we have created here. So that will return false. And then we have a for in loop, which is pretty much a for loop that anybody can create in any other object-oriented programming language. But it's pretty much just an example just to show you how to cycle through the different properties that are in an object. Very simple, just like anything else you've probably written, not too much of different syntax at all. So that's pretty much it. So today we kind of went over creating objects. We went over some dot and bracket notation, how to create constructors, prototyping, getting really into inheritance and kind of how easy it is, but how the syntax can be a little bit different, and how encapsulation is pretty much the same, but instead of having private and public methods, you're kind of just going into a bunch of different things.
Yep. So we've actually got a couple of minutes here. I'm going to steal a little bit of time.
Go ahead.
All right. I want this. Beautiful. Okay, so let me just create a real quick page here. So all that I did was I just added in a blank project. I'm actually using Visual Studio Community here, and I want a brand new item, and I want an HTML page, and I'm going to call this index.html. So one of the big questions that had been coming up here inside of the Q&A is about debugging. And one of the things that's worth mentioning is that in both Visual Studio Code as well as the full-blown Visual Studio, you can absolutely set your breakpoints, hit F5, walk through everything and so forth, just like you typically would. Now, one little thing that you can also do is do this through the browser as well, that Edge, IE, Chrome, Firefox, and I think basically every other browser under the sun has some level of F12 or debugging tools as well, which are very powerful. So I'm going to real quick here just create a simple setup. Here's a little div, and I'm going to go ahead and let's just, I don't know, I'm just going to set up a label for equals, and let's say name. And then let's go ahead and say name. And give me a real quick input, type equals text, and ID equals name. And then we'll just go ahead and leave it like that. OK. All of that works just fine. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set up a very simple little script here. And I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm going to do alert and hello world. There we go. And so now let me just go ahead and save that real quick. And let me launch that inside my browser. Chugga, chugga, chugga. And now what you're going to notice there is I get that little hello world popping up. But one of the other things that you'll notice is that if I hit F12 here, which works in Edge, it works in IE, and it also works in Chrome. And if you're using Mozilla, it's a different
Shortcut, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
okay.
Yeah.
Somebody in the Q&A will tell us what it is. Yeah. But in any event, what you'll actually notice inside of here, first of all, is that there is a DOM Explorer. I need zoom it. There we go. There's a DOM Explorer. It will not let me down into that window. Fine, I will do it this way. There we go. There's a DOM Explorer, which you can use to, just sort of like the name implies, explore the DOM. So I can actually see the body, I can see the div tag that we created, I can see my script, and then if I drill into here, I can also in turn see the label and the input that I created. Now, one very cool thing about the DOM Explorer is that not only will it show you all of like the CSS and everything else, which you can see off on the right-hand side, but this is actually dynamic. That when you get in and you start doing a lot of client-side JavaScript, there's a very good chance that you're going to wind up adding and removing items, and you can actually see that dynamically right inside of here, which is extremely powerful. You can also go in and start highlighting different items. If I go in and I click Select Element, you'll notice that if I click on the, come here, there we go. If I click on Name, you'll notice that it highlighted name here. Let me go in and grab the text box. If I click on the text box, you'll notice that it selected the text box. So a very easy way for you to go in and kind of explore and bounce around. If you double click on things, you can actually rename them. So you can actually just play around with that page and keep testing all of your JavaScript right inside of here. You'll also notice that there's a debugger. And the debugger will work exactly as you would expect. So I could go in, I can set a breakpoint, and then you'll also notice right here at the very top that I can choose how I want to walk through the debugger. So I can do a step into, which would follow into a function. I could step over, which would run the code, but just not show me what that actual function is. And then I can do a step out, which will basically just go all the way down to the next closing curly. So if you were like stuck inside of a loop, it's a very easy way for you to go in and escape that. And then finally, last but not least, is the console window. One of the great things about browsers is that they'll bury your JavaScript errors. Which, if you're going to surf the web these days, that's actually a very good thing. I think almost every single page has some form of a JavaScript error. So it's great if you're just surfing the web, but if you're actually doing development, it's
not so great.
Yeah, not so good. So fortunately, we've got a little console here. So if you did have an error, it will actually print out to there. So if you ever run a bit of JavaScript and it just doesn't do anything or it doesn't do what you expect, the console is a perfect place to go. And one of the things that Gabby's been doing an awful lot of is that console log. And you'll notice, let's just go in, console log, come back over here and hit refresh. And now you'll notice, well, first of all, that I'm actually getting the breakpoint. And you'll also notice that I even get the little mouse over, which is one of the things that I love in Visual Studio, that I get the little mouse over, and then I can go in and see everything inside of there. So I can see what the console log is all about. But you'll also notice that if I just finish this the rest of the way out, just by hitting play, come on. There we go. And I go to my console, that it did in fact write out that hello world. So if you are struggling with trying to get something working, bring up the F12 tools, go to the console. You may have to refresh the page just to make sure that your errors are, well, fresh inside of there. But if you do that real quick, then you'll be able to see everything right there. So just kind of a real quick overview of the F12 tools. Okay, cool. So with that, let's go ahead and put a little bow onto this module And then we'll take a look, we'll come on back in 10 minutes, and we'll take a look at how you can sort of kind of do threading by utilizing web workers. Ooh. All right, we'll see everybody in 10. All right, welcome back. Gabby's going to be taking care of the Q&A over there. I'm going to actually be driving this module, so you're stuck with my jokes this time around. And in case you're just tuning in, first of all, where have you been? Second of all, this is JavaScript for experienced developers. And then in particular, because there was a question about this in the Q&A, I do want to kind of re-emphasize here that by experienced developer, what we're actually talking about is experienced in particular with non-JavaScript languages. So that if you're making the move into JavaScript, or maybe if you're just trying to fill in some gaps, that's what this particular course is all about. So with that in mind, now let's turn our attention to something else that doesn't behave exactly the same way in JavaScript as it does in other programming languages, and that is threading. And so we're going to take a look at threading by introducing web workers, and then we're also going to start to add on a little bit of jQuery here. I'll talk about why in a couple of minutes with both promises and deferred. But first up, let's talk a little bit about web workers. So consider the fact that typically when you're writing JavaScript, because in particular you'll be writing this for, or quite often you'll be writing this for a browser, you might want to be able to do threading. Well, you're not going to be able to do threading. Think about this for a minute. That the whole goal of JavaScript is for me to be able to, as the developer, send code down to some unsuspecting user, and they just simply download that code, they trust that code, and they run that code. Think about all of the bad things that could happen there. So as a result, browsers are going to put a lot of constraints over exactly what it is that your JavaScript is and is not allowed to do. And one of the big things that was not allowed for quite a while was any form of threading. Obviously, though, this is a bit of a problem because if we want to be able to do any advanced processing, we want to be able to maybe do some graphics work on the client and really take advantage of all the processing power that's available on the client, we want threads. And so HTML5, the W3C, introduced this concept of web workers, which is how we can simulate threading. Now, if you're looking for kind of full threading support that you might have, say, in a .NET application or inside of a Java application, you're obviously not going to get that here, but this will at least give you what you typically need for most scenarios. So what's a web worker then? Well, a web worker is basically a process where we can tell the browser that we've got some script that's going to take a little while, and we want this to run asynchronously. Now, it's going to be a very simple threading implementation. For some reason, it just keeps wanting to zoom in every time I hit Control-2. That's fine. So it's a very simple threading implementation. But like I mentioned before, you're not going to have control over the thread itself. And on top of that, it's also going to be implemented through a very basic messaging system. So that what we're going to have is I'm going to have my little web page here. So here's my little browser, as it were, my terrible little drawing. And then over here, I'm going to have my little web worker. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll send a message over to the web worker. The web worker will then go ahead and do its little work, do whatever it is that it might want. And then when it realizes, oh, I need to let the caller know what went on, it's then going to send a message back to the original caller, which in my little drawing here is going to be the browser. Now, one very big key to keep in mind with web workers is that they are going to be running on this separate thread over here. And so synchronization can become a bit of a problem. That what happens if I have a script on my page that's going to update the UI, and then my web worker wants to be able to update the UI. Then what do we do? Well, in order to just solve the problem by not allowing that problem to actually take hold, the rule is that the only thread, if you will, that's allowed to update the UI is the main browser thread. So the web worker itself is not going to be able to update the UI. In order to update the UI, it'll simply have to send a message back to the browser and then ask the browser or expect the browser to go ahead and update the UI. So it does not have the ability to update the UI directly. The web worker also has some limited access to the resources either on the system or in the browser. You'll notice, for example, that you don't have the ability to access the window object. You don't have the ability to access the document object. So there are some limitations around what the worker can do for both a synchronization and a security perspective there. So just to kind of limit things there. Now, the basic structure, the way that this is going to work is just like you see here. What you're going to notice is that we're going to give me a pen. There we go. We're going to create a brand new worker just by calling new worker. Now, one of the questions that's been coming up an awful lot in the Q&A is, what version of JavaScript are you using? Gabby, do you know what version of JavaScript we're using?
I sadly do not know.
Okay, and that's good. I don't know either, so we're in the same boat there. So we're using a version of JavaScript that's just simply going to work.
I will look into it, and if I find the answer, I'll put it in the Q&A.
There you go. But just to simplify things a little bit, I mean, we're using a version of JavaScript that just simply works. You know, that if you open this up inside of really any browser that's been developed in the last couple of years, everything that we're going to be doing is going to be just fine. The worker, however, is an HTML5 item feature component. And so as a result, you may find that some browsers don't support the worker. Again, every modern browser, I would say anything within about the last year or so, is going to support a web worker, but some older browsers may not. If you are not sure whether or not a browser supports the worker, just simply check to see if worker, capital W, because it's the name of the object, just check to see if it's null. If it's null, then that means that the browser doesn't support web workers. If it's not null, then you know that it does support web workers. Okay, let me go ahead and erase that. Beautiful. So now the next thing that you're going to notice is what I had mentioned earlier, which is the fact that it's a messaging-based architecture. So that we send a message to the worker by using post message, and the worker, let me just get myself a different color here, is going to send a message back to the original caller by also calling post message. So kind of a very simple messaging architecture here, that if we want to send a message to one side or to the other, it's the exact same method, simply post message. And that would send a message from one side to the other. Now you're going to notice in my little sample script here that I just have basic text. You could absolutely use an object, and we'll come back and take a look at that in just a couple of minutes here and show how you could do that. You're also going to notice that the event in question, so that way if we send a message down to the worker or if we send a message to the calling script, the question then becomes, well, how do we actually capture that message? The answer is the message event, which you can see right here. So the message event tells me that we got a message in. So when we call post message, it's going to go here. And when we call post message the other way, it's going to come back over to there and then execute the code from there. Now, what's great about this is you're going to notice the similarity that it's the exact same setup on both sides. That if I want to send a message, regardless of where I am, it's post message. If I want to receive the message, regardless of where I am, it's that message event. Now, inside of that event handler, what you're going to notice is we're going to declare an anonymous function, which Gabby did a great job in talking about earlier. And we're going to add in a parameter. I like to call it E for event. And the data in the message, so whatever that payload is going to be inside of a property called data. So when I go in and I say, in my case, hello worker, and I send that on down here, that's going to wind up inside of that data property. And then you're going to notice down below when I go send something back, whatever it is that I sent back is going to wind up inside of that data property over there. So very kind of a nice little mirror image there for our worker. One last little thing before I set up the worker. I do want to just mention real quick that inside of a worker script, self is going to be the worker. So it's just going to be self, not this, but self. You'll also notice that the script is going to execute immediately on load, but we'll talk more to that in a moment here. Okay. So let me go in and start setting everything up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up a very simple echoing system here. So I'm just going to simply say div. I'm going to say label for equals message, and we'll say message. And then we'll go in and say input and type equals text and ID equals message. There we go. And I'm also going to make my life a little bit easier just from a formatting perspective. I'm just going to add in a couple of real quick classes here and add in a style sheet up at the very top. I wrote this out earlier. Boom. Ah. Of course, you put that into the exact wrong spot. There we go. All right, perfect. So now I've got that, and then let me also add in a real quick button. So we'll say button type equals button and ID equals send message, and class equals btn, and then send message. And then down below, we'll go in and set up an unordered list. ID equals message list. There we go. OK, so now what I want to do is I want to start setting up my, my basic little worker. And I'm going to do that by just setting up a script here. And I'm going to wind up just globally declaring my variable just to make my life a little bit easier here. So I'm just going to simply say worker equals, and I'm going to say new worker. And that's going to allow me to create that brand new worker. And in my case, I'm going to point to my demo.js, which I'm going to create in just a moment. And now what you'll notice off of that worker is that I could go in and add the event listener, as we saw on the slide, or we can just simply say onMessage equals, and then just create the function this way. Either way will work just fine. So this is going to receive messages from the worker. And again, I like to just simply use E there to go ahead and set that up. And again, I'm going to say var message equals E dot data. And so now I've got the message, and now I'm going to add that onto the unordered list. Now I'm going to make my life a little bit easier here by utilizing jQuery. I've got everything pre-typed out just to make sure that if I make a mistake, I've got somewhere to go. So I'm just going to steal the reference to the CDN right here. OK. I'm going to side note real quickly here, tangent mode. So you're going to notice here that I'm calling out to a CDN or a content delivery network. Content delivery network, geographically diverse set of servers that are all designed to serve up very common scripts, including jQuery. So what's going to wind up happening is instead of the user downloading this from my system, they're going to get this from a remote system, in this case, one that's hosted by Microsoft, of course. The one little thing that I do want to mention, if you are going to open up this page or any of the other pre-canned demos that I already have, make sure that you launch it via a web server. So Control F5 to just launch IIS Express in order to be able to run it that way. If you just simply double click on the HTML file, it's not going to work, in which case you'd have to actually download jQuery and make the reference that way. OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and use my little syntax of pound for the ID and my message list. And then I'm going to append on my list item, whatever the message happened to be, and then close out my list item just like that. So when we receive a message, we're going to add that onto the list. We also have the ability to send a message on over. And so we do that by just simply setting up, in my case, a click event. So this is going to be send message, click, function, boom, boom, and we'll just go in and say, all right, well, when they go in and do a click, I want to say worker dot post message and a message. And our message is going to be var message equals, and then we'll just go grab that from our message value. OK, so just to review what I've done here, what you're going to notice up at the very top is I'm going to create my worker and point to the worker script. This is going to allow me to send or receive messages rather from the server, and the actual message is on the data property, which we can see right there. And then when we want to send a message, we just simply call post message. So that will send the message. Now, like I mentioned before, when we're inside of the worker script, it's basically the exact same thing. It's just like a mirror image. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to copy, and I'm going to paste that code. But like we said before, instead of it being worker, it's just going to be self. There we go. And so again, the message is just going to be there. And when we want to send a message back, it's still going to be that exact same post message. So I'm going to receive the message, and I'm going to set up a very simple echoing system here, where I'm just simply going to say self post message, whatever the message happened to be, plus, and then processed. There we go, just like that. And I don't need the rest of that. Cool. So I think I've got everything. We're going to find out here. We're working live here. And I called it demo HTML. There we go. OK, so in theory, I should send a message, test, click send message, and sure enough, it came back from that worker doing that test process. So very simple way for me to go in and set up my little worker and be able to send a message over into a worker on a separate thread and then get that value back. Cool. But there's a couple little issues here. That one of the little things that we need to keep in mind, first of all, is that out of the box, that's all you get. You just simply get post message to send a message over, and you just simply get on message to receive the message. That's my little catch there. And that's it. That's all that we get. We don't get baked in events for, say, start and end. But this can be very easily implemented. That just simply set up a system where you're going to send a message over to say start or send a message over to say stop. So just go in and set up your own very basic messaging. The other very big thing to keep in mind is that even though in my first little demo, I just sent along a string, we also have the ability to pass along any JSON or JavaScript object. So if you want to just create the object and just send that on over, you could do that as well. And then you're also going to notice that if we want to stop the worker, from the page or from the caller, we call terminate. And from inside the worker, we call close. So let's actually take what we did there and kick that up a notch. Let's add in an object, and let's add in a little bit of a messaging system there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back over, and I'm going to set up a little object here. So we were watching Gabby earlier, so I'm just going to do this. I'm going to call this message object. Message object equals, and we're just going to use the little curly brace notation. And so I'm just going to say message colon, and then we'll just read in that message property. So what we've just done, and I know I've kind of used the exact same message colon message, this is going to be the new property that we've just created. This is going to be the data that will be inside of there. So that's going to be the setup. Whoops, I'm in the wrong spot there. You, come here. There we go. So now we're going to create that message object, which will then have that little property there for our for the message. So that's where it's going to wind up being. So now let me go over here into my little worker. And now what I want you to notice here is that instead of it being a message, here, let's just put these two side by side. There we go. And there we go. OK, so what you're going to notice is over here on this side, we've got the message object. So that's what's going to be inside of data. So let's make that a message object. Message object. And then we'll go in and say var message equals that message object dot message. So very simple little object. That one little property, we just buried it inside of there. So in theory, this should still do the exact same thing. So let's go back in. Let's go in and say test. And sure enough, uh-oh, I made a mistake somewhere. I want our message. And somewhere in here, I have, let's see, var message, message object, message, that all looks good. Post message, message object. I did save everything. Interesting. What are you doing to me? Post message, sending that over, post message. It's just that. And I want my on message. I should just be getting back the message. Yeah, it's just a string. Huh, cool. All right. Well, see, I told you we were going to have a live little demo here of the F12 tools. I'm going to try this real quick just to see what's going on here. So I'm just going to go into the debugger, and I'm just going to put a little breakpoint right next to my receive here. There we go. So that way I can actually see what that is. And then let's click send message. And this is what I really, really like here, is that it does give me the ability to see, and it is just tossing over an object. Well, that's interesting. OK, then. And you're not going to let me go to the source. OK, fine. All right. I apparently do have a little mistake somewhere. See, this is why I had everything pre-baked. So I'm just going to go right to my pre-baked. All right. In any event, see, we're really cooking here. So let's go in and take a look at my message object here.
I'll say someone said,
oh, yeah.
They're saying you're appending the object, not the message within the object. Object is misspelled right there.
Ah.
There you go.
There we go. Typos. OK, let's try this one more time.
They all just let me know.
That's interesting. Oh, I have it misspelled a couple of times. Message object is the data. Message object, message. OK. And then let's just come over here. Object, object. That all looks good. Message, message.
And then it says,
message,
read
message.
data.message instead of e.data?
No, it's going to be .data.
OK.
Yeah, it's always going to be .data.
And then this question has come up 3 times, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but since we're quickly doing this.
Yeah.
Is DOM available for a worker to process?
So, no. So that's a great question. So the question is the DOM available for the worker process? And the answer to that question is no. It's a security thing. So that anything that you want to have the worker work on needs to be done through the messaging. So you need to send the appropriate message over to the worker. The worker has to send the appropriate message back, and then the original page needs to update the UI. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to close that real quick. Just in case it's like caching something.
Oh wait, and then it says same person who said he is appending the author to the list, not the message member. So in the append of jQuery.
Nope. Yeah. There we go.
Oh, never
yeah.
mind.
So it was two things. It was my typo, and it was still cached. So now it's working. Okay. There we go.
That's all in this episode. I hope this tutorial was helpful. In the next episode, we will cover the remaining part of web workers. And also, after that, we will move towards server communications. Is your mind ringing with questions, queries, or doubts? Do you wish to learn more? Then visit our website www.millionlights.org and post your questions on our forum. We will be really happy to clear all your doubts. If you missed anything and want to rewatch it, you can download it from our website or can watch online as well. You can also participate in our webinars, discussions with the subject experts, as well as get Microsoft certification on various courses through our website. You can also find us on Facebook by the name Millionlights and also on Twitter. For more such interesting tutorials on coding, app development, and building rich UIs, keep watching Microsoft Art of Code, brought to you by Millionlights. Thank you.